Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show. This week's episode, I am so excited about. You just have no idea. Wait till you listen to what we have in store. Everyone goes, "You're always excited." I said, "Yeah, because I get to learn so much from so many incredible ethical spiritual practitioners." And today's episode, you guys are in for an amazing treat. So I want to welcome Daniel Rocha, who is the founder of the New Moon Guidance and also the author of The Cosmic Mirror. He is an astrologer and sound healer. Incredible work that he does. Daniel uses the wisdom of the stars to help people find clarity and purpose in their lives. Now, his unique approach combines astrology with sound therapy, and that's offering really powerful insights into both the inner and the outer weather of your life. So whether it's understanding personal challenges, improving relationships, or navigating life's big decisions, Daniel's really dedicated to helping others live their most authentic and fulfilled lives. And his mission is to empower people through the ancient language of astrology sound. And his vision is a world where everyone is aligned with their true selves and is in good health. Daniel, welcome to the Connected Spirit.
Hello, Courtney. Thank you so much for having me here. It's an honor, truly.
Like most of us, we come in contact with people through social media, and I came across you and I was really, really intrigued because your work with astrology and then combining it with sound healing and weather patterns is very unique in that I just haven't seen it. And we had this chat, and I'm like, I got to have you on the show. So, you know, I really would love to get a little bit of backstory, for the listeners. Just kind of how did you get into astrology?
Right. So I think we can tune it back all the way to when I was a preemie baby, because I was born 3 months premature. And I mean, the journey started there. I apparently it was a miraculous thing because back in 1985, I'm dating myself here, by the way. You may not have had a great survival rate being 3 months premature.
Yeah.
Back. And I think my first journey into this world was, my mom kind of took a tumble down the stairs, and then that's how I was sort of ejected into this world. Not at that moment, but so it all kind of led to where I am today, and I'll tell you why. So my mom came to visit me every single day in the hospital, and I must have had an NDE, which is a near death experience, because this is something that I was told. And my mom would bring me this music box, and she would play the music box for me, and she would sing me tunes. I think it really was that loving energy from her. And that music box is profound in its way because it's a vibration, it's a sound. And we're gonna get all into like the sound stuff, but that's kind of how it all started, or at least that's where the seed was planted. And as I grew up, I found myself very much in tune with the patterns and the vibrations of the world. And I think, as with all children, we have this fascination, this awe with things that, we go, wow, like, whether it be bright lights, for example, a compelling story. We're drawn into the fantasy realms. We're drawn into things that inspire and make us go into awe. And so as I went into my double digits, I lived in Richmond Hill at the time, and my sister had this book. And this book was a Wicca book. It was green magic, and it had to do with the elements and the elementals. And it just so happened that it coincided with this video game that I played back in the day called Secret of Mana. And basically, it validated the existence of these elementals because they were in a video game, they were in a book. So it had to be true, right? And so I started playing around with not really casting spells, so to speak, but attuning myself to nature. And I'd always find myself going up to the Dunlop Observatory close to where I lived there and just attuning to nature. And then I started inviting friends up, and it became this whole thing of like, let's attune to nature. Let's let's, commune with these elementals. And I had this big fascination with not only the elementals, but weather as well. And weather became a whole thing for me. So you start to see where everything is kind of building up and tying in. And then, of course, we reach a point in our lives where we start adulting.
Yeah.
And that's when everything shuts down, right? So going into like the late teens, into the 20s, we're too busy with hormones, with puberty, with school. And then you go into like, oh yeah, let's go and find a job. And you're like conforming to the societal norms. So anyways, I'm going to fast track this a little bit. I went through some really dark times in my life, as I'm sure many have, and really lost in the direction that I wanted to go. And it wasn't until after my Saturn return, which is a big thing you'll hear in astrology, after 30 years of age or in and around that time, I started to have this reawakening of the sound, of the experience of when I was a preemie. And that's a whole world on its own. That had a little to do with psychedelics, but we won't go there. And having to have this reawakening where I was like, there's something I need to revisit. There's something that I need to grasp in this life, because what I'm doing right now in the day-to-day and the mundane is not enough. And I started to, like, I moved out to Winnipeg around this time. I had a really tough time with my career, with relationships, just because I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know where I was going. So there's a lot of self-sabotage that came into play as well. And then it wasn't until I had my first reading that it opened up the floodgates for me. And, I experienced what astrology was. I experienced what tarot was. And I talk about this in my ebook, The Cosmic Mirror, this story much more in depth, but also, how it all starts to tie in to every aspect of our lives. And so after this reading, I was actually told during this reading, maybe it's something I should be exploring. So I used this as an opportunity to start doing my own research. And I looked into the world of astrology. And I discovered that it was really profound. And then it wasn't until this point that I thought back into my memories. I'm like, oh, there was another book. When I was in elementary school, there was a book called Star Signs that I got from the Scholastic books, if you remember the Scholastic program. And I started going around telling everybody their star sign and who they're compatible with. And then I was like, oh, and other people were like, yo, this is too much. Because, we're like just in the preteen. And my book got stolen because I think either someone had enough or they're like, this is so cool. I want that book for myself. So, I was naive. I kept it in my desk. Someone stole it. So I started having all these reawakenings, these bringing back of these memories. And I'm like, I got to do something more with this. And sure enough, I dove into doing tarot readings. I bought my own cards. I started in the world of mediumship as well, because that's what I really was drawn to. And then astrology really kicked in, and then later sound healing. But the astrology, wow, like you can't make this stuff up. This world drew me in, and I started to expand into it, bringing back all these elements that I have experienced earlier in my life, and bringing it back to this world of astrology today.
So the signs have always been there, and it's always been within your soul. That's so interesting. There's many people that'll have awakenings at different points in their life, but they can go back and reflect, Daniel, and look, and they can see kind of the breadcrumbs of where life was leading them, where their soul was leading them. And it's really, really powerful when we realize there's no coincidences. There's got to be something more to this. And you and I talked pre-show interview, and your work with astrology and sound healing is absolutely incredible. Now, you talk about really like establishing flow and surrender in our daily lives. And through your work, you've actually done that. So I'm wondering if you can explain a little bit about what you mean by establishing that flow and surrender.
Absolutely. So we can go through our lives putting resistance to everything. And that's what we do naturally, right? Our egos tend to step in at every direction that we turn. The things we want to buy, the careers we want to uphold, the amount of money we want to bring in, the finances. And these are all fine and dandy because these are what allow us to live out our lives and to really experience. And I'm going to take quotes, little quotes here and there from Ram Dass, because I got a lot of great teachings from him, where we're just sort of, we're in that spiritual world where we're trying to explore something greater than ourselves, but we're always kind of locked into the ego side of everything, right? And when we're putting resistance to everything in life, and what I mean by that is, you know, whether they're disagreements that we have, or, you know, we're having second thoughts about decisions that we're making, instead of just sort of not being afraid to step into the unknown, then the signs get louder and we continue to put up resistance, you know, and this can be applied to your health. This can be applied to your relationships. This can be applied to your career. There is an element of, you know what, I'm just going to take this as it is here and now, and I'm going to see how it plays out. Because if we're always trying to be one step ahead of the game, we're always going to be creating a natural resistance to things, because we're trying to interpret, we're trying to decide this is how it's going to go. And I think this is where astrology really comes in handy, because it's not about determining your future. A lot of people think of tarot and astrology and they think, okay, you know, this is about finding out what I'm going to do in 10 years. This is about, you know, fortune telling. And I really disagree with the term fortune telling, because it gives it a bad vibe. And for people who say, you know, we can determine your future with astrology and with tarot, like life readings, 20, 30 years, take it with a bit of a grain of salt, because as you are going through your day-to-day life and the here and now, you are creating the energy for the next moment and the next moment and the next moment. And only by experiencing that present moment in its fullness, in its entirety. And look, whether it's the beauty or the ugly, whether it's, you know, thick or thin, highs, lows, it's all part of it. You have to experience the highs, you have to experience the lows. It all is just about what's going on now. This too shall end, you know? And it's one thing when you're on your lows, you're like, yeah, this too shall end. I'm looking to the bright and glorious future. And then sure enough, you bring yourself up, and then you're up at the top, and then you're like, but this too shall end. It's like, oh no. That's the part where we don't agree with it. And that's where we start creating the resistance.
So you're saying it's kind of like a lack of presence in the moment and really appreciating like where you are right now, the highs and lows and everything in between, and like honoring the seasons of our lives and not looking so far ahead that we're missing what we need to really learn and embrace and embody like right now. Is that what you're saying?
100%. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And so when we look greater into astrology, like when I work with my clients and do astrological readings, yes, I can dive into, okay, this is kind of the energy of what you're going into, but it's all leading up to the present moment. What have you experienced before that's now dictating the present moment, which is sort of shaping the future? And as you, in getting an astrology reading, for example, now you may have just opened a door to something you did not really think about before, but now that's part of your reality. And now that's shaping the direction that you're going to go. So there's almost in getting a reading, there's almost an element of surrender to that reading, but there's also an element like we want to sort of have the control, like, yeah, this is the way our lives are going, but it's all there. Like it's really hard to explain. It's all there in that moment, and where you are is exactly where you need to be.
That is so powerful, that statement that you said. Where you are right now is exactly where you need to be. And as somebody who is neurodivergent, my mind can get scattered and I'm often thinking about the next thing. That's probably one of the biggest challenges, I would say, honestly, with me is, you know, presence. And so I consciously have to do that throughout the day, take pauses throughout the day. And it's not easy. And sometimes we can get so excited with aspirations and dreams about what we want to achieve, but yet we're missing out on the sacredness of what this moment, what we're doing right now, who we are right now has to offer, because that is actually what allows us to create our future. So this is really, really powerful stuff. Now, for our listeners, could you like quickly give them something that they could reference? How can they witness or recognize resistance versus flow?
That is a very good question. That is the name of the game. That is the big question, because there is a bit of control in everything, and there's a bit of surrender thing. And so how you recognize that present moment. Let me give you an example. I am going through school or through education to establish my career. And instead of embracing every moment of my education, and when you're in study mode, you're kind of there. You have to be in the present moment. But there's everything that happens in between. Life gets messy. And what happens in that gunk of life, in that flow of life, I call it one and the same, gunk and flow, because it's all there. How are you approaching those moments? Because you're so focused on getting from point A to point B that you have just skipped everything in between. Everything that makes you who you are today and now and now and now. I say that because every second that passes, you're already looking back 1 second to who you were before. But what's happening now at this second and now? Like you almost got to keep thinking that way. And it will hurt your brain if you try to logically put yourself in that place. So this is where we talk about the flow and the surrender. Instead of always looking to the next destination, let's take a daily example. I wake up. I got to have my shower. Okay, I got to think of breakfast. What am I having for breakfast? Okay, go downstairs, prepare my breakfast. Okay, I got to get driving to this place. And, you go there, or you take the bus, transit, whatever. Okay, I'm going to do this for work. Okay, then when I get home, I'm going to make dinner. All right, what am I making for dinner when I get home? Okay, great. Wait, I got to stop by the convenience store and I got to pick up a lottery ticket because I'm going to win the lottery for tomorrow's draw. Fantastic. Okay. Oh, all right. And you go and you pick up the lottery ticket. Oh, and I'm going to buy this. And then you get home and it's like, I made dinner. Okay. What am I going to watch? Okay. Now what time am I going to sleep? I'm going to set my alarm for the next morning. And this is lather, rinse, and repeat. This is the day to day. And in that day to day, have you really embraced any of those moments in between each of those checkpoints or those moments that you are looking towards? And that's the micro. Look at the macro. It's the same with the school and the career. I am looking to my career. 10 years down the road, that's everything that I'm putting my focus on. Forgetting everything that's led me up to that point, or what I'm doing as I get there. I get there. Yeah, this isn't really what I thought. So now you spend another 10 years doing the next thing. So that's fine, but to really surrender to every moment that brought you to that place, like talking to you about my story, how I got to astrology, it all tied in. Everything was like a big kaleidoscope, kind of everything worked together, connected to the right people, but there's an appreciation for those people, those moments, and those experiences getting from point A to point B. I'm also a professional rambler, so sorry. I tend to drink things out of it.
Professional rambler.
Yeah.
No, I love how you share that, because we can have these aspirations, but we're missing out on so much of the lessons and the experiences that actually support us. And sometimes we can get caught up in the doing that we miss out on the real significance and the power and the magic of being.
We are human beings, after all.
That's right. Absolutely. And that is so powerful. This is not only like astrological, where we think about what's the future going to hold, but like our future is being created in this moment with our thoughts, our words, our actions, our feelings. This is really empowering. But also, too, what I'm hearing you say is that it really requires us to take responsibility for what we're doing here and now, that we're really not victims of circumstance. This is
Absolutely.
this is big stuff. This ain't woo-woo, you guys. This is incredible, but this ain't woo-woo. This is really deep in our work, transformative. So let's talk a little bit about, like you talk about again, flow, and you've referenced a few times like the nature. So I'm wondering, can you tell us like how does tuning into the flow of nature? Because this is something that you've shared, like you've been aware of since you're young, right? You've had this interest in this connection with nature and weather patterns. How does that actually help us align with our intuition?
Very good question. Full of good questions. All right. So this is the key.
Mhm.
Everything is vibration. Everything. It's around us. You like if you could make a Star Wars reference and say it's the Force, if you want to go that direction. But I think George Lucas got it right on point where the Force is essentially a vibration. And that vibration is all around us through all living things, every person we connect with. Through nature, nature has its own vibration. We have our own vibration. Our technology, albeit maybe a lower one, but it's a vibration. Everything has that. And everything that vibrates creates frequency. And our thoughts are frequencies, they're vibrations. Our heart emitting an EM field is a vibration. The thing is we get so bombarded with different vibrations throughout our day, through our technology, through our thoughts. The thoughts are the big one. Not a lot of people realize that a thought process, it's a process. It generates a vibration. And of course, depending on what you're thinking about, having the stresses of the day to day, that daily kind of task thing I went over, that's all thought and that's all vibration. So you have that kind of, and here's the resistance again, but happening in a more natural, organic way where our thoughts are kind of butting heads with our flow, like what we want to do versus what we should be doing. Our brains always kick in and be like, wait a second, no, we got to do this instead. We got to protect our finances. We got to protect this. We got to protect that. It's all about protection. And it creates its own vibration, its own frequency, which then kind of combats your own. And, then you're on technology and it has its own vibrations. You're getting bombarded every which direction. Now, when you're spending time in meditation, out in nature, you are, or like, let's say you go to a sound bath, right? You go for a reading, you're taking on knowledge and information. Things are a little bit more streamlined because you're now immersing yourself in an environment where you have no choice but to surrender to that frequency and to that vibration. Mm-hmm. Especially when you're out in nature. Like for me, like I was talking about weather as I was growing up, I was like fascinated by it, more so because of the feelings I got from it. Whenever a big storm started to roll in, and I've always been afraid of loud noises since I was very young. Like I hid under my bed when the road cleaner truck drove by. I somehow remember that. That was a very interesting and traumatic experience for me. It's bizarre, the things that you remember, but how susceptible I am to certain frequencies and to certain vibrations. But when a storm rolled in, I see the big clouds. Seeing those clouds, that's taking in a frequency because they're generating their own frequency and vibration. The sound of the wind, the rumbling of the thunder, the look of the lightning, like it was just, you just have no choice but to surrender to its epicness. Like you're just in awe. And so any place you go to in your heart where you feel comfortable or where you feel awe-inspired, and as a medium, I'm sure this is something that works for you, is giving humility to what is big and great and like the grandiose of like a landscape, of a mountain, of spirit, connecting with spirit. That's all allowing yourself to surrender to a frequency or a vibration. And that's
Yeah.
how we can really do that.
So really our intuition is picking up, and I just want to make sure I'm getting your interpretation because everybody has a different view.
Mhm.
So your interpretation, your thought on intuition is allowing ourselves to really witness how our emotions speak to us through our interactions, whether it's through the storm clouds coming in, the sound of the thunder or the rain on, a tin roof, and witnessing how we emotionally respond to those frequencies and those energies and what comes up from that.
Absolutely. Yep, you got
Yeah.
it. And it's not just the emotions, it allows your thoughts to just level out and you
Yeah.
just really pay attention, right? And it makes space for your body now to start surrendering. And when your body surrenders, this is the true path to healing.
Yeah.
You can introduce any modality of energetic healing, sound healing, Reiki, mediumship. They're all energetic vibrations in their own way, but by surrendering to those vibrations, this is how we heal.
And it's not easy. And it's surrender is a big word. And I know in mediumship development, that was actually one of the words that my mediumship teacher taught us in the very beginning. And to be honest, I didn't really understand what that meant. And until maybe a couple of years, like really embody what that surrender meant. And it can be difficult for people because you're vulnerable. You're relinquishing control. So I'm curious, like, what advice would you have for the listeners who are struggling, who struggle with letting go of control?
That, yeah. So that's also the name of the game, right? Because, so when we're talking about letting go of control, this is letting go of control in every sense of the word, whether
Yeah.
it's through your physical senses. This is where meditation comes in. And when I say meditation, I want to make it clear that you don't have to sit in a room and go, oh, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of different ways to meditate. And whatever works for you, works for you. If that's a walk through nature, great. I find personally sitting down by a trees or walking amongst the trees, listening to the wind, they're very good at collecting and recycling that energy you put out, and you can breathe in something fresh. So, being in nature is one of them. And learning to meditate, I think, is another great thing. And a lot of people say, I think this is where the struggle comes in. Remember, I always talk about putting resistance. People put resistance up to themselves. They get in their own way because they have an expectation of what meditation should do, or an expectation of how they should feel after taking that walk in nature. Well, Daniel said I should take a walk in nature, breathe 108 times, and everything's going to be dandy, but it didn't work for me. So what the hey? I mean, it works differently for everybody, right?
Mhm.
And I really believe that finding your way to surrender and relinquish control is important. The other thing is your thoughts. So I know this sounds cliche, but always going back to your breath or to a single point, like even if it's a thought, you create and establish a single focal point. And people are like, well, then I'm still thinking about something. It's better than thinking about 100 different things.
Yeah.
Look, meditation is a discipline. Relinquishing control is a discipline. You don't, when you go to the gym to build muscle, you're lifting the weights, you're putting resistance on your body to build your muscle, right? You have to create, it's kind of like backwards here, but you have to kind of create the resistance with yourself to be able to say, I am going to sit in meditation or take that walk in nature. And I'm going to do this, 5 minutes every day, 3 minutes in the morning, 2 minutes at night, whatever. You establish a routine, you create a discipline. Motivation is not good enough here.
Yeah.
If you can tell yourself to take that time, a little bit of time each and every day, you can then discipline yourself to say, okay, now I'm in a routine. Now I'm learning how to surrender control.
That is really important what you're sharing is because meditation, it is a practice and it is a discipline. And, especially for somebody who's neurodivergent, it does present some challenges for me. And what works for someone may not work for me necessarily, but it's through consistency and showing up. And we can do this. We just can't give up. If we think about some of the time and the effort that we dedicate to crap that doesn't even matter, where meditation can bring this inner balance and harmony that really then manifests in our physical life. If we could put that same effort and energy into it, ooh, I'm telling you, it shakes things up. Meditation is something that anybody can do in any amount of time. It's just about actually committing to showing up. So I love how you shared that there's so many different ways and it doesn't have to be like super mystical. It can just be even going out in nature, which is probably one of my favorite things personally. Now, you've often compared and you've spoken about comparing like our inner world to a weather system. I'm wondering if you can dive a little bit deeper into how does astrology actually relate to some of the storms that we experience in our lives?
Absolutely. So there is our inner weather, and then there's the outer weather. And I say weather because when we talk astrology, we always talk about forecasting and astrology because it's a tool really of saying, okay, this is what's going to happen. But when we talk about our natal charts, when I talk to clients about their health charts in astrology, like I can put any theme into a chart and say, this is what I'm going to be reading up on. And it makes perfect sense. Like it blows my mind each and every single time I work with a client through astrology and how everything just resonates, right? Because that birth chart, that moment that you take that first breath when you come to this world, the planets, the cosmos all imprint on you. You've now crystallized your existence into this plane with that first breath. The planets are vibrating on their own frequency and their own level. So we're going to get into a little bit of as above, so below. Mm-hmm. This is a very important concept for like all of life, and something I have really resonated with since learning more about sound healing as well. But if you take our emotions, for example, we attribute the moon to our emotions, the push and pull of the tides, the water, the cups suit in tarot. It's all speaking to our emotions, and the moon is as well. You can take any other planet in our solar system. You can take the stars because astrology goes into depth about the stars, about the asteroids. They're all creating their own weather up there. Not to say that there are storms happening in the middle of space. Actually, there are because, you think of supernovas and Oort clouds, and we can go into the science of it. But let's just talk about our solar system and keep things simple. They are all a fractal of what's happening beyond the solar system. And you cannot tell me that these massive entities that are out there in space, like Saturn and Jupiter and every other planet, are not influencing here us on Earth. Their vibrations and their gravity is its own vibration, its own frequency is so profound that it affects us here on Earth. And depending on the planets and the stars, they all have their own stories. And if you were to dive into those stories, you will find that they're very closely associated to how these planets were formed in the first place in the solar system. But also the stories we tell today, like myths and legends, religious stories, all having ties and connections to what's happening up there in the cosmos. Mm-hmm. So they're all up there doing their thing in their specific configurations. When you're born, that configuration is imprinted on you. And then, of course, you live your life and you go through your Saturn returns and your Mars returns, and they're still influencing you. What that translates to, I'm going to use Mars as a very good example because everyone knows Mars. It's the red planet. It's the masculine symbol. It's the planet of passion, of can be anger. It can be war. That's what we know Mars as. And you go through mythology, you learn that. But when Mars is reflecting its beams, whether it be through the sun or through other stars in space, it's emitting a red light. Light in itself is a frequency, it's a vibration, and that red light influences us whether we feel it or not. And the same thing happens with the other planets and the other stars as well. That creates, in essence, our weather, our internal weather, because not to say that our destinies are intertwined with the cosmos, but in a way they are, because what's happening up there is reflected here on Earth. And it's not just us, it's everything going on around us. It's the weather systems that are present, like we talked about before we started recording this, the West Coast versus the East Coast, and different climates have different effects, but it's that weather, because everything is elemental, but everything's vibration, and that translates to elemental, because elements, fire, earth, air, and water, and beyond, we can go into spirit, we can go into the element of surrender, are all just different frequencies of the vibration. So there's like the primal vibrations that kind of shape the earth and shape the influences of weather. Then that translates into our emotions. So, for example, Mercury, air, the suit of swords and tarot is our mind, our thought process, right? It's very fast moving. Mercury is one of the fastest moving planets in the solar system. Saturn is all about the responsibilities, the things that kind of weigh down heavily upon us. It's Father Time. It can represent death as well. So all of these, as above, everything happening in the solar system is influencing us in the microcosm, so below, around us and within us. And so the weather that happens around us and the people we interact with, it's no different than the weather itself. When like you and I are having an interaction, or let's say you have an interaction with someone you don't like so much, right? I hope that doesn't apply to me. But like, you're creating weather, because what is it but a multitude of elements coming together, and they agree or they don't agree. You might be the high pressure system to someone else's low pressure system. It might create a storm, right? You get that feeling sometimes like, oh, I just get a weird vibe about that person. It happens. That's the weather. That's the inner weather. That's the weather around us. So you can see how it's all connected as it goes down. Then you go down to our cellular level, and this is where disease happens. This is where the flow, is our heart working properly, our liver, because each of our organs is also tied to planets, because I learned about this through medical astrology. And, again, internal weather, your organs are all doing things. They might not agree with certain things you're putting in your system. So it's just all connected.
This is absolutely transformative, what you're saying. I'm just listening so intently, going, oh my God, this is wild. How can someone begin to really understand and balance that inner weather for themselves so that they can avoid creating, some unnecessary chaos or resistance? Because, some people, I'm very honest and transparent, and my listeners know that. In my earlier life, I'll say there was a lot of storms, a lot of resistance, a lot of chaos. Just going to call it what it was. And it wasn't until I was much older where I was like, wow, I got to deal with this. I gotta look at my external world has to be a reflection of what's going on for me. And so I really went into this deep dive, which I still do, because I think we're always looking and reflecting and really, well, at least I feel, I hope, I aspire to, and I hope other people do as well, to really kind of heal that inner weather, that inner dialogue, that our inner world, so that way we can really amalgamate with the essence of who we truly are at a soul level and what our soul came here to experience. And so, it's not always easy doing that. Now, for myself, there was a lot of deep shadow work and inner healing and therapy and all that good stuff, And I'm wondering, how can you, like with your expertise, how can people really understand that and balance that inner weather for themselves?
Well, I think it all starts with, we're going to go back to surrender again, because you almost have to surrender to the transformations. Those storms and everything, we were talking about living in the present moment. Those moments shaped you into who you are today. You're never going to fully get over those storms. There's always going to be something, there's always going to be the potential. But how small can you make that potential? That's what it really comes down to. And this is, again, where the meditation comes in. This is where that surrender comes into play. I think the other thing is, if you have some kind of knowledge and know-how of maybe what is to come, we can say that, but a knowledge and know-how of what is happening now and why it's happening now, then you can say, well, this kind of this happened, ABC happened, and that's why now I'm here at D, right? Mm-hmm. So everything kind of played into the next point, which leads you to the current present moment. I think it's about balancing elementally as well. I'm starting to kind of go in a direction of what I call elemental astrology, because it really is all about the elements, because the elements, we go back to vibration. Mm-hmm. I think there is a need to understand the cosmic forces at work within yourself and to understand what elements are at play in your body. Scientifically speaking, I don't know all the elements that compose us, but, we can go into the carbon, to the iron and everything like that. But this goes beyond that. This is, we look at your birth chart, for example. There could be a very heavy earth element in your chart. We need to break up that earth element, so we introduce a little bit more air. If you have a lot of earth in your chart, then you will be probably very grounded, immovable, stubborn. Where's the flexibility? We need to introduce a little bit more air. The air breaks up the earth a little bit chaotically. And this is where that chaos comes in. You can't transform unless you introduce a semblance of that chaos. And so there's almost an acceptance that needs to happen of those storms and of that chaos, to say, this is what's happening now, and it's happening because, again, our internal weather. What is weather trying to do on Earth at all times? And nature, balance. The high pressure systems moving to the low pressure systems. It's the same thing with our bodies, the same thing with our how we align with our emotions and thoughts. Everything is just trying to create a homeostasis, a balance. And so by understanding those elements at play, bringing in that air, okay, it's going to create chaos. I get it. I own it. I acknowledge it. I'm not going to emotionally attach myself to it, but I acknowledge it. And I think that's where the key thing is. You cannot emotionally attach to every little storm, chaos moment that happens, because you will drive yourself crazy. And believe me, I know. And this is why I got into astrology, because that has showed me time and time and time again that it's just constantly a balance that's trying to form. I'm going to acknowledge it. And I'm going to look into my charts, because I'm an astrologer, and give that know-how. It's like, yeah, there is a little bit more air coming in right now. I get it. Okay. If you have a lot of fire, there's a lot of passion. You're starting new things all the time, but you're never finishing anything because there's so much fire in your chart. Well, we're going to introduce some water, because the water is going to help stabilize that. It's the most, violent way to do it. You get all the steam, you're clouded for a moment, you can't see what's going on, right? But, it's a cooling factor. And you're like, whoa, okay, I'm going to put my emotions behind my thoughts, my ideas, so that I can give it a little bit more clout. And then the thought process goes in, and then you crystallize it. And that's the earth element being brought in. So there's a need for balance of all of these elements. And this is how you start to do it. So I will also say that having a reading, like looking into your astrology charts, not just your natal chart, that's a good starting point. What's happening now? What's happening today? What is your chart looking like for the next, month, like a lunar return, the next year for a solar return? You can, by arming yourself with that knowledge, you can now open up new pathways and opportunities, be prepared to acknowledge and embrace that chaos that's happening. And you can now surrender to it with a little bit more clarity, because you're like, this is how it's going to go. And then we get into the sound, which is, introducing the new frequency to sort of elevate everything up.
Wow, that's incredible. I'm excited for my solar return reading with you. I can't wait. And you guys,
Mm.
I'll definitely share this with you on the show. So stay tuned. What's one piece of wisdom that you wish everybody understood about that connection between surrender, balance, and transformation? Because I feel like there's many people that have different thoughts and views on it, but some of it just doesn't quite land with everybody, or people miss the mark in trying. What's one thing that you could share with them?
I would say, taking it back to earlier in our conversation here, is really embracing that present moment. And
Mm.
whenever you find yourself looking to the past and worrying about the future, take a step back, take a moment and say, hang on, take a deep breath and say, this is what I'm focusing on right now. I think this is probably the most crucial piece of wisdom, because we're constantly living memories of our past, which is creating storms within us and in our minds, creating reliving traumatic experiences, and or looking to the future and saying, how is this going to hold up? How is this going to work? And by constantly putting ourselves through that, we're never here. We're never here and now. We're never, in the beauty and the ugliness, the good and the bad of the present moment, because we're too worried about, this happened to me before, so it's going to happen to me again. Well, no, you don't know that.
Mhm.
There is also, by living in the present moment, an element of diving into the unknown. And so I know I've said it in so many different ways, and I tend to ramble on, but I really think that being in the present moment and acknowledging and embracing the highs and the lows and understanding that internal weather within yourself and acknowledging it and saying, wait, but what's the weather like around me? What's happening with the weather outside or the people around me? You start to make those connections, but you can only make those connections when you are in the present moment, I find. And, astrology has really helped me to grasp that, to constantly be in the present moment with someone's chart or my own chart, or doing readings for other people or doing sound with other people. So yeah, I'm going to say present moment, and always bring it back to the breath.
I love that. Daniel, you've shared so much information that is so valuable. I know it's really going to nourish and support the listeners. Can you let the listeners know where they can find you, what you have up and coming?
Absolutely. So I am on Instagram at New Moon Guidance. That's NU, not NEW. I'm also, I have my website, newmoonguidance.com, where you can look to me for readings or sound healing. Sound healing is a bit different because I usually do those sessions in person. And in coming back to speak more onto the sound healing, we can, dive into how that connects to the astrological level as well, with sound specifically, and like with certain instruments that I use for sound healing. So you can find me there. Where else? There's so many places. Okay, I have my ebook. So on my Instagram, I have in my bio, there's a link where you can find like my ebook, my website. You can find sound healing information on there, as well as more of the work that I do. And yeah, these are the places that you can find me. And sorry, did you ask me about events yet? Or
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay, cool.
Yeah. What do you have up and coming?
All right, cool. So there is an event coming up on November 2nd. This is an in-person event, and this is Angels and Ancestors. I work with a very dear friend and colleague of mine, Lauren Power, and we work together to do a sound bath while she does crystal Reiki. And I also bring astrological elements in because I like to combine the two. We're doing it during a new moon, which I think is around that time. So we focus on the energies of that new moon. And in this case, it's about setting intentions for the season ahead, but also about aligning with the new moon energy and really about connecting with your ancestral wisdom, your spirit guides, and your guardian angels even. So this is going to be an event of connection. And I do expos as well. So my Instagram, You can keep up to date on those events and those expos. Currently, I'm just doing local here around Toronto, Ontario, but that may change soon, hopefully. And I do readings at special rates. I do in-person readings in Uxbridge as well with my sound healing. And maybe when we're talking about sound in the next time we do this, I can talk a little bit about the BioWell, because that is this device that allows us to measure and see the science behind the energy work. That's really fascinating stuff that I want to talk about too. And that's really about it. I've also started the Galactic Weather Watch, which is my passion project, using the astrological charts to look at weather and even going back into the past to see extreme weather events. And I'm really diving deep into this research because I really want to start doing weather and giving people insights into the weather and astrological phenomena and how they all intertwine. So you can find all of that on my Instagram.
Incredible. So fascinating. And everybody, we will be having Daniel come back and we're going to be delving into sound healing. So excited. So this is really going to be a part 2 to build upon what we've already shared and talked about today. Daniel, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show, to share your thoughts and your wisdom and your voice and your love with our listeners. It's been absolutely amazing.
Thank you so much, Courtney. It's been an honor. It's like so much love and light to you and everything that you do, truly. And to all the listeners, you've got this love and light to you. And I'm so grateful to have been part of this, Courtney. Thank you.
You're welcome.